Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Grimm Reader and the 22nd episode of The Grimm Chronicles, my weekly reading wrap-up. I have you in a new location, or the camera is in a new location, so let's see how things go. Been an interesting week in terms of my reading. So I guess the John Green obsession has quickly faded because I think I am in agreement with someone, I think it was Brian, who said, I don't think he's a very good writer. I mean, when he does the crash course stuff, or some of his videos, he's quite sort of witty, but it doesn't seem to translate into fiction, at least. I mean, the newest book is okay as sort of little snippets here and there that you read when you're waiting, you know. But the novel, I started one of the YA novels and I just could not continue. I didn't care for it at all. I mean, it's YA, so I'm definitely not the audience, but I have this feeling of, you know, even YA people have to recognize that there's other stuff out there. If you know, I guess what I'm saying is it may not be even good for them to read too much, to think that it's so great. I don't know. But on the other hand, he is a good person. I think he's doing good things with the nerd fighters. Enough of John Green. Let's move on. So, yes, another young person's booktube career that I just like her videos, and she's having this meteoric rise in popularity, and it's obvious why, but it's Emmy. I've mentioned her before. Emmy on the YouTube's Canadian YouTuber. She does a lot of videos, and I always, you know, as always, often as we all do, I don't watch them all to the end, but in one of them, I don't even know which one it was, but she talked about reading a novel by Richard Brautigan, of all people. And it was something called In Watermelon Sugar, and she made me want to read it. But I've always been interested in his most famous novel. Someone recommended or talked to me about it, and that is Trout Fishing in America. So that's the one I've almost finished. I am talking about a novel that's not completely finished, but I have a feeling that's okay. It's a quick read. It's almost more like a novella. So it's one of those books. It has such a sort of strange reputation because it's sort of it's the hippie novel. It's the counterculture novel. You know, which are terms that even for someone like me don't have that much meaning anymore. And I'm wondering what they have. I mean, what does Emmy associate? She's very young. She's 20, And I was checking up on it, and it was published in 60. Well, no, he wrote it in 61, published in 67. So, you know, it's. I don't know if it really, in the sense that it's experimental and wacky and weird, it's a hippie novel or counterculture, and there is a critique of aspects of society in it. So I guess from that perspective, you could say it's hippie-ish. And it's one of those novels that is hard to talk about because of its experimental style. And I'm sure, so people out there who've read it will know what I'm talking about. And it's as if it has this sort of sense of, are you initiated into this book? Because if you know about it, you know why it's weird. And if you don't, it's hard to talk about it. Beyond sort of generalities about its experimental. So let me try and say a little bit about it. So for one of the things that people always say about it, or that, I mean, is that the title, Trout Fishing in America, it's not about someone who goes trout fishing in America. Although, I have to say, I would be interested in people who are anglers and fishing people out there. Brian, for example, has his channel. I have never been fishing. You know, I feel like, you know, another, you know, I just haven't. It's just not been. Although I am related. My cousin's kid, he's actually learning to be a forester in Germany, and he's obsessed with fishing. He even has, in Germany you have to have a license. Well, maybe here too, I don't know, a fishing license. He knows all about fishing. And so from that perspective, even though it's not really about that, there is quite a bit of fishing, and there's quite a bit of stuff about trout in it. But the sort of conceit of this novel is that title, Trout Fishing in America, is the name of the main character, such as it were. And I'm already kind of thinking back, because I went back and started reading it, And in the beginning, the first pages is actually a dialogue between the narrator slash stand-in for Brautigan and this other character, Trout Fishing in America. And I don't know if that happens again, or if it just kind of turns into that person or creation is the narrator, Trout Fishing. It's almost as if there is a narrator, and then that narrator is describing the character of Trout Fishing in America, who does. But of course, it is also a certain type of autofiction. It is based on his own experiences, Brautigan's, a camping trip that he undertook with his wife and young daughter, and the way they kind of interact is, I have to say, is a little bit hippie-ish. Like, they're very sort of casual about the daughter playing, and like there's this one scene where they're actually swimming in, seems like pretty dirty water. He describes it as a bathtub, but it's not actually a bathtub, but maybe it's a bathtub. One of the experimental aspects of the novel is that it will like bring in something as a metaphor and then turn that metaphor into something real and then just go with it. It's almost like a shtick in a certain sense. Like he'll say, like something in the beginning, I was reading something about he needed corny, he only had corny tackle. So, bait, certain type of bait, corny bait. And then he said, oh, it's like a bad joke. And then he talks about the chicken who crossed the road. So he brings in a bad joke and sort of riffs on certain things in a certain type of way. And I really, really enjoyed the beginning. I'm still kind of in a weird mind space where it appealed to me. And as I read on, it has lost a little bit of its charm, because it is sort of, you just kind of go with it. It's like you are sort of swimming in the river. And then even in the beginning, he talks about, well, who is the trout? And he says something about how he ended up eating the bait that he'd made for the trout, which made him the trout. So, who's being caught on the hook, so to speak. And I guess, you get into the critique of capitalism, whatever, something looks like we want to have it, or, and then we get sort of reeled in, the whole, it is a kind of useful metaphor, the whole fishing metaphor. And it's a funny novel. Like there's one thing he seems to do is that whenever he mentions other things or books, there's a whole he has a list of books about fishing, and I was just assuming that they were all made up, but they're all actual books about fishing. Or he'll mention some novelist and it's an actual novelist, so it's as if the other stuff is all made up, but when he actually brings in other things, oftentimes it's real people or real books. I was surprised. There's a whole bibliography of fishing, early fishing books, going back to British stuff, English stuff from centuries earlier, and they're actual books about fishing. so it has sort of almost like footnotes in the text, and so yeah, I guess. So it's a mixture of experimental autofiction and critique of society or social critique. I was looking into, there is a comprehensive website that tells us more about Brautigan's life, and it was an interesting life and not a happy life, and he did commit suicide. He probably, fought demons. He grew up poor, and there's actually one chapter that I really like called the Kool-Aid wino, yeah, because there's a lot of winos in this book, and port seems to be the drink of choice. But the Kool-Aid wino is all about this little kid who's part of a big German family who's poor, and they all go out to work, and for some reason to do with illness, he can't work, and so the narrator observes him with his sort of Kool-Aid ritual of making the Kool-Aid, which I don't know if Brautigan is kind of alluding to the acid trip Kool-Aid, which, see, I'm not really up on Beats and the other people. I read One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I really enjoyed it, but I haven't read On the Road. So, the whole beat culture that Brautigan is kind of referred to with sometimes, I'm not that familiar with. But I'm really glad I read it, so I'm grateful to Emmy, and I do want to read the watermelon one, so In Watermelon Sugar, because that sounds really interesting too. I do like wacky stuff. I like experimental fiction. if you know, I have a pretty high tolerance for it, and he seems like a really interesting writer. I mean, I'm not sure how great, you know, I don't know. And I was even sort of having weird sort of echoes of someone like Gaddis, just in terms of, I can't remember what it was exactly, but the experimental aspects of it, I guess. Well, I guess I'm thinking of, sometimes in Gaddis, this is just a general comment, there are these extended party scenes. Oh, that's what it was. That's right. Yes, it was very interesting. It's just the way my mind works. So there were 2 party scenes towards the end of Gaddis, or before the actual ending. And one of them, everything seemed to divulge into sort of prehistoric. So there was a devolution of humanity. People became more animal-like and more sort of subhuman in a certain sense. And then it switched to another party, a weird party, and that had all this sort of fishy stuff going on. So analogies to fish and aquariums. And that's kind of, and those party scenes in general had sort of echoes of this experimental stuff that Brautigan seems to be doing. It would be interesting to see more about what he himself read. I mean, he is a very interesting writer, and it's too bad that he decided to leave us so soon, as is often the case. So yeah, give me your thoughts on Brautigan if you've read him. If he's kind of away from, he's not, you know, I'm surprised to see Emmy having mentioned him, but see, Emmy gets a lot of people send her books because they want her, you know, she's you know, had this big rise of popularity, and I'm sure someone just sent her this, and now, you know, and so she read it. Good for her. So yeah, that's that. And then what else? I'm behind in my reading of, I'm still reading Anna Karenina, and at some point I'll bring her back into the conversation, but I won't do it this week. It's still really enjoyable, but it's a little bit, I mean, I did read a bit more than before, but it's still not a lot. And I'm also kind of behind on my reading of my books that I have to review, the fairy tale book, the Japanese fairy tales. I think I'm going to skip over the rest of the introduction, which is annoying me a little bit. It's written by Kurgescu, and I don't know. It's okay, but I'll come back to that, and I'll tell you a bit more about the stories, the actual stories that he's compiled in this book. And then the last thing actually this is going to be longer than I thought, per usual. So there's this book here that I started, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to continue. I feel like I've had a whole kind of experience with this book, even though I've only read a few pages of it. And so when I picked it up at the library sale, I was like, wow, that looks familiar. I think I remember Bridget saying stuff about it. And then I went back and watched how Bridget said she didn't like it. And I had sort of mixed feelings when I started, but I was sort of like, oh, really? A May-December romance? I'm kind of over those. At least at this point in time. I just don't want to read about them. And then it's Halliday, so it was her. She's kind of drawing on her stuff with Roth, and anything to do with Roth these days, it's just for me, it's just one big eye roll. I cannot be bothered, and so that was sort of a big strike against the book in a way. And then I went and watched Sonia from Enthusiastic Readers' very, very laudatory review of it. I didn't watch the whole thing, to be honest, but can't remember if I watched it or not. But she at the outset says she's going to spoil it for us all, and I'm really glad I watched it, because it made it go up in my estimation because of understanding the sort of the conceit of the whole thing. And Britta alluded to it in a very kind of cryptic way, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's actually kind of cool. But I don't think it's cool enough for me to go back to it right now. And I have to say, mainly because of the whole, I don't want to read about, there's something about where I'm at, you know, I don't want to read about old writers and young women. And then I made the mistake of sort of opening the last pages, and even on the last pages he tries to pick up the person interviewing him, and it's kind of like, I find you very attractive, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just so over it. I don't know what it is. It's 2021 and I'm an old lady. So, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be continuing with it. I think I'll keep it, and maybe I'll come back to it. We'll see. And then the last thing I want to talk about briefly is Edwardson Aubyn. because at the book sale I found this beautiful edition of the last work in the Patrick Melrose, what do you call a 5-book series? Petrology, I don't know. No, that's not, that's the Pentagon. I don't know what that is. I don't know. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I had to take this for $2, even though they're all different. Like the first book I read, which is the only one I've read, so the shocking first book with the terrible trigger warnings for parental abuse was excellent. I thought it was really good. I really think he's a great writer, and he's sort of, you know, I can read stuff about very, very privileged people if it's as well done as Aubyn does, because he's a rich, drawing on his own privileged background, but in terms of the way his parents treated him, no privilege there. I'm sorry. And so, but this is the last one. So, but on my shelves, I do have the second one because I went ahead and bought this. So it's all different. Like the first one was an ebook. The second one, it looks like this. It's this type. This one is this type. So, I don't know what I'll do. Knowing me, if I really like them, I'll want a matching set. So anyway. So what I did is I did start the second one. I'm not very far into it, but I kind of want to read this. And so, yeah, I want to finish the Brautigan, continue with Anna Karenina, read my review book, Lafcadio Hearn, and continue with this. Those are my plans for right now. And then I am sort of putting this aside. So, bye-bye, Halliday. Yeah, let me know what you're all doing and if we like this angle or not. I want to show you, well, no, she's just sleeping and she's not that interesting. I mean, right now she's not that interesting. And yeah, let me know how you're all doing. And do you watch, what other big booktubers do you watch? Or do we watch big booktubers? We all watch snippets of, or we watch each other somewhat. But anyway, I will talk to you very soon. And thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.